Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Houston A Plus Challenge Chew and Chat segment hosted by myself, Erica Milson. This morning, I am honored to introduce our guest for today, Kate Walsh. Kate has served as the president of the National Council on Teacher Quality since 2003, leading work to ensure that every child has equal access to effective teachers. She launched the first ever review and rankings of the nation's teacher preparation program. Previously, Walsh worked at the Abell Foundation in Baltimore, the Baltimore City Public Schools, and the Core Knowledge Foundation. One thing I learned about her that is so fascinating to me is that she started and ran a boarding school located in Kenya, East Africa. She also started the first alternative certification program for teachers in Maryland and served on the Maryland State School Board. Again, I'm so honored to have you today. Thank you so much, Kate, for joining me. Welcome.
My pleasure.
Yes. So I just want to get started since we only have you for 30 minutes. I want to hop right in and just get filled with knowledge on teacher quality. So I'll start with my very first question.
Okay.
I shared a little about who you are. I briefly shared that you've made it your mission to ensure that all students receive teachers who are qualified to stand in front of them and teach. Can you explain to our viewers just a little bit more, if they were to hear the phrase teacher quality, what exactly is that and what prerequisites make a teacher of quality?
Great. I'm trying to stabilize my phone so you don't see me doing nothing but trying to hold the phone as we're working through our technological challenges here. But it's so nice. Oops, sorry. I just, okay.
Okay, now unmute yourself and then we'll be good to go. There we go.
Okay. Well, I think we're all growing used to the fact that we're just going to have lots of technological issues at every turn. And, we'll just live with the hiccups.
Yes.
So, it's really interesting. People say, okay, well, what makes for teacher quality? And the very flip answer to that is it's a teacher who is effective, and that means somebody who can raise student learning. And that's the easy answer to give, right?
Yeah.
But I think that it is more complex than that. I happen to believe that kids don't learn who aren't well-adjusted, who feel respected by their teacher, who feel that they're heard. So yes, it does. The simple answer is also the right answer. It is that children are learning because the teacher's created conditions and has herself or himself the disposition to create an environment that is supportive of all children in that classroom. So it's a simple answer, but I think it's fundamentally the right one.
Right. So it's so interesting that you say teachers who allow for a child to feel respected, they feel heard, and they're also raising student learning. Let's explore a school district screening process for a bit, thinking about that definition you provided, if you will. So 15 years ago, I sent my resume to a campus of my choice. It was actually the campus where I student taught. I interviewed and I got the job. After that, I completed the application for the district and I received the keys to my classroom. I knew nothing about, I always loved kids and I knew how I wanted to be treated as a student when I was in school. So I held on to that. But once I did my paperwork and submitted everything, I went to a week or so of training, but no one really knew much about my teaching practices. The building principal kind of knew because, like I said, I student taught there, so he would peek in whenever I would teach lessons. but the district had no idea who they were hiring. What are your thoughts on the district screening process in relation to teacher quality?
Well, I actually think that the hiring process for teachers by almost all school districts, very few exceptions, is done pretty poorly. Well, first of all, they often, like a city like Houston, is often trying to hire far too many people in a very short time frame. And so how thoughtful that process is, it has to give way to the fact they just got to hire, I don't know how many teachers, and they hire 1,500 a year in Houston, a lot.
Right.
And I have a hard time hiring one person and doing it well, let alone 1,500. So the way budgets works against that process being a good one, because they don't get their budget, and so they don't hire until the summer. And you know, there are so many things we should be doing to improve how we hire. I think you probably should be less concerned with whether the district knew what you could do than the principal.
Gotcha.
Because let's be realistic. I mean, the district just can't absorb that. But the principal needs to play an integral role, don't you think? Needs to be. But when they've done studies of what principals do when they hire new teachers, a lot of them don't ask them to do a sample lesson, to deliver a sample lesson.
Right.
The interview is pro forma. It's kind of often done over the phone even. I mean, it's just, there are so many practices that are such sound personnel policies. You'd think that people wouldn't hesitate, but a lot of people don't. They aren't doing these things.
Right. I hear with working for Houston A Plus, we have the opportunity to, partner with several campuses and districts. So I'm starting to hear more principals say they are having teachers model lessons during the interview process. But when it's crunch time and they're trying to fill those positions, it doesn't have, they just don't have the time to do it, and they're just trying to, unfortunately, it appears to have a warm body in the classroom, and we'll develop them throughout the school year as much as possible. But it brings me joy to see that there are more principals now realizing that that is a good practice to put in play. Like, let's get teachers to model lessons before they, go in front of kids.
But the districts need to make it possible for principals to do that kind of instructional leadership.
Okay.
And that's, I think every principal knows, or most every principal knows, they should be asking a new teacher or a prospective applicant to do a sample lesson. Mm-hmm. But if they've got the district asking them to do 200 other things, it goes by the wayside.
Right. I agree. So thinking about the district, I shared that when I got hired, and I think this is still the process for a lot of new teachers, you attend like a week-long professional development like within the district, or if you're a returning teacher, I think the district, they will take up 3 to 5 days of your coming back to school preparation time, and they'll give some type of PD around some learning. And I know that a lot of them are starting to create professional development departments. So you have a lot of classroom teachers who are now transitioning into these particular roles. What are your thoughts on professional development provided by the district, and are districts equipped to enhance the quality of teachers?
Okay, well, this is the question I always hate to get. I'm just being honest, because there have been nothing but negative and depressing and downbeat studies written about professional development in education, And somehow I'm going to come up with the one thing that we're all going to do that's going to turn around professional development in schools. And I never know what to say to this. There are things that districts should do to improve professional development. One, they shouldn't treat all teachers as if they have the same skills or lack of skills. They shouldn't put them into a big room at the start of the year and spend 2 days talking to 3,000 teachers and expect anyone to take anything away from that. And the thing is, districts know that, but then they don't quite know it. Good PD requires teachers to be working on a specific problem of practice, not just throwing them into a room and saying, develop yourselves. And they need to, teachers need PD that is honed to their knowledge and skills. And so what that requires is good evaluation. And if teachers are going through a good evaluation process, between the teacher and the principal and whoever else is doing evaluation, they come up with the skills that need work. And so, but then there's the really hard job on the part of the district and the principal to make sure that there is the resolution to filling those knowledge gaps. It may be a course. I suspect it usually isn't a course unless there's a subject matter deficiency. It's more often the PD that has always stuck the most and been found the most effective is when teachers are working with other teachers and not bringing in a $5,000 a day consultant, but really digging into a problem and having the time to do so.
Nice. I love that you talked about evaluation process. Like, that's a good way to think about, or should be, how do we determine what professional development is needed for the teachers so that they are of quality, like kids are getting effective instruction.
Yeah.
Love that. So, that was a great answer. So I read a piece of text by Kimberly Rice that said the assessments future educators must take and pass are less consistent predictors of teacher performance. Those assessments determine if your state finds you fitting to become certified to teach at any campus in their state. What are your thoughts on these assessments being the deciding factor of a certified teacher?
Well, I'm going to give you an answer that is not the one that everybody wants to hear right now. Mm-hmm. And we're very disturbed by the number of states that have decided that they no longer want to make sure people have basic literacy and numeracy skills before they even enter a program. Oh. And the reason they're doing that is because of disproportionately poor performance on the part of Black and brown teacher candidates. Mm-hmm. And people will say, well, there's no correlation between a basic skills test and whether someone can be a good teacher. And first of all, we know that teachers need to be literate. We know they need to know some basic math. Mm-hmm. The basic skills tests are appropriately administered before someone gets into a program to make sure they can read and write and do basic math. Uh-huh. And so we don't support, we think it's absolutely essential that the state does due diligence on that. And it also sends a message. It says, okay, we have to change the standards for getting into the profession because too many Black and brown teachers can't do it. Well, the problem is deeper than that. The problem goes back to K-12 education. but we don't get out of this problem. We don't get out of disproportionate performance until until we attend to what those candidates really need.
Right.
Now, more complicated is subject matter tests, especially at the elementary level. People say, well, there's no correlation in those subject matter tests and future teacher performance. And actually, the research does not say that. What the research says is, what is really occurring is this is not something that is even studied very often, because it's hard to study whether teachers are effective who haven't passed their licensing tests, because they tend not to be in schools. Mm-hmm. So it's a very poorly studied, but what studies there have found a positive correlation.
Okay.
Now, is there a perfect correlation? No, because we all know that what you know about your subject is just one part of what makes you effective. So the fact that you do well on that one part doesn't mean that you know how to communicate and speak to kids. It doesn't mean you are motivated to teach. It doesn't mean all the things that we know matter just as much.
Right.
But the one thing that we've never debated is, if you want to teach, you need to know what you're going to teach about. And I'm on a tear these days about the fact that so many teacher prep programs don't target their coursework so that people will do well on their exams. So we're shooting the messenger, but the real problem is that the reason somebody doesn't pass the history portion of their exam is because they didn't ever take an American history course, or the one they took was something that's totally irrelevant to what they're going to be teaching.
Right.
Now, we're working hard to get teacher prep to think about owning their test. You know that in nursing candidates pass their licensing tests, their professional exams at 86% first-time pass rate. Do you know what it is for elementary teachers? 46.
Yeah. Yes. That does not. I went to a school where we had a pretty good education program, but there was I thought we did, and now listening to you, I'm like, evidently we didn't.
That happens a lot.
Right. So many students who could not pass the content area exam. I mean, it was crazy, like how many times they were having to take that test. So much so in the district where I taught, they were given waivers. Like you could teach for a year with this waiver, have time to take the assessment. So you're right, like there's obviously something you gotta go.
Well, here's what I want to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
Did your program talk a lot about those exams and what you needed to do to get ready for them? Because in most states, what we hear is teacher educators or the faculty will say, well, you have to go take those state tests. They're just a requirement. You got to get through them. Here's a test prep booklet for you to cram study, all this stuff. And that just doesn't happen in other professions. They know they need to pass those exams and that the exams matter.
Mm-hmm. Full transparency, no. They would tell us, when you take your assessment, just think of the perfect world. Well, we all have different perfect worlds within a school, setting. So I think it was really challenging for some of the educators to think like, what is that? Like, which answer am I picking? Like, is it this answer or this answer? But that's what they would tell us.
I don't even know what that means.
It's like what? So they would tell us, pick the answer that would happen in like a perfect school setting.
Okay.
That could vary amongst so many educators. But that was our preparation.
Well, I think we're sending a deplorable message, especially to Black and Brown teacher candidates, that really questions their own self-worth and capability.
Yeah.
And the fix is so easy. Just make sure you give them the content and they will thrive.
Yes.
But instead, the movement now is just to throw out the tests but nothing changes from that.
No, that's a good solution. And now that you say this, when I read the article, quite naturally, I'm thinking about people I went to school with. So I'm like, well, yeah, get rid of the test. So, can actually be in their career of their choice. But now it's not that. That's not the answer. Yeah, that's sad.
No, it's not the answer, but it's the popular point of view right now. A lot of people believe it. And if you look at any other nation in the world that does well, that has a good education system, they have very high standards for what it takes to get in, and we can too.
Yeah. So this leads perfectly into my question. It's no secret that whenever there's a major shift in the economy and companies partake in restructuring or downsizing their organization, there's an interest in becoming a teacher. Like it goes up.
Right.
So when that happens, I tend to hear the phrase, "We always need teachers." That tends to trend and justify the interest of people becoming teachers. Quite naturally, it makes the profession pretty accessible for most. Based on your mission to improve teacher quality, what advice or considerations would you offer our friends who might consider the education route, because we always need teachers? Like, I get very frustrated when I hear people say, well, I'm just gonna go be a teacher. Like it's, nothing.
Well, I'm going to take you a few years before that. Well, no, maybe we're talking about the same time frame. Do you know that 50% of people who get a teaching degree don't teach?
Really?
50%. Well, at least they don't take a job the next year in teaching. So that suggests they might not take a job at all. And I'm sure you knew people when you were going through an ed school that they just didn't know what else to major in. Or, so everybody knows about teaching because we all had teachers. So they say, well, or some people pick it because it's considered a very easy major. But it is a very popular place for people to land because they're like, okay, I guess I could always be a teacher. And what that does to the quality of preparation is it isn't good. So I've told this anecdote way too many times, but the Florida Teacher of the Year told me once that she had taken in 2 student teachers back to back, year to year, and both times the student teacher arrived in her classroom and said, I'm just doing this to get my degree. I don't have any intention of being a teacher. And she said, I never wanted to do this again. I'm like, why would I spend a full year training somebody who didn't want to do that work?
Right.
And that just brings everybody down. It brings professors who are teaching future teachers. It brings them down because they're dealing with kids who have no intention of pursuing this career. I mean, it isn't good for the profession. So I argue that we need to really reduce enrollments in teacher prep, even though everyone says, oh my gosh, shortages. Well, do you also know that we're producing 2 times as many elementary teachers as we need to hire every year?
Wow.
Yeah, nobody talks about that. They're just like, oh, we're having shortages. Oh, enrollment's down. But traditionally, teacher prep programs have been churning out way more teachers, way more people who say they want to be a teacher. Well, so after you get rid of half of them who don't want to teach anyway or whatever, or they couldn't pass her licensing test, unfortunately. If you do that, then maybe you understand why we have shortages, because so many people are in those programs who don't really want to be teachers.
Yeah, yeah. I just want them to stop, Kate. Like,
well, wave a wand and make it happen.
especially, with our work that we do with coaching teachers, it's really hard coaching a teacher who is genuinely not about kids. Like it's hard. It's hard trying to figure out, how do I motivate you to care enough to want to do more for the kids sitting in front of you, just simply because you love kids. Like, I haven't figured that out yet. Like, and I don't know. I'd rather them just stay away and let us truly grow educators who are in it for the right reasons, versus because you want the summers off to be with your kids.
Well, it'll be very hard for a teacher prep program to ever say we're going to slash our enrollment. But it wouldn't be that hard for state governments to start saying, we only need to hire in the state 5,000 elementary teachers next year. You as a program can't single-handedly admit 5,000 students, or what I'm saying. I'm being a little bit flippant, but I think it falls, and there's not a state in this country willing to do that. But I do think we have to find ways to screen out people who do not want to teach, and it's not in the interest of the teacher prep program to do that. So it's going to have to fall to the interest of states and school districts who, for example, they say, you're sending us 300 elementary student teachers, and and we're only going to need 10. We only need to hire 10 next year, so I don't need to take 300 people on. So, there are ways for states and school districts to start imposing their authority here, but it doesn't happen very often.
Right. We need some risk takers.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Kate.
My pleasure.
For time. Anything else you'd like to share before we end our call?
Well, I think we're in the toughest time ever for teachers. And that is all that's on my mind, is what teachers are going through, and what especially young children are going through. This is their first experience in school. So I think this is a really sad time for us all. But I just want to express to those listeners who are teachers how grateful I am for your service, even when it's probably not that much fun to go to work. So, but this will end, and I know everybody's waiting for it to end, but this will end. But thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kate. I hope I get a chance to chat with you again. Yes, and thank you to all of our viewers who watched us today. We'll be back next month with a panelist with a really hot topic. So we hope that you all continue to follow us and tune in to Houston A+ Truant Chat. Thanks.